Bam!
We are here. And Dr. Pat, well, everyone, I'm Mark Anthony, and
I'm
this
Dr.
is my
Pat.
co-host, Dr. Pat. You have a really, really great theme for tonight's show.
I do. I love it. And let's talk about how that came up. And I think I can articulate it. But first of all, those of you tuning in, this is a live call-in show today. This is all about you. We do this 2 or 3 times a month. That has been our sort of promise to you. And we keep that promise, and we're going to talk about it. 1-800-930-2819. Jacob is with us. Linda, Jessica. It takes 3 people to run this show because we have the best audience on the planet. The best.
Yeah,
like
we
the
do.
capital B besties. They're like our besties. Look, we did a great show this morning. That's going to be airing. We're going to tell people what that was about. This is Pride Month.
Yes.
And I already did a show on one of my earlier Dr. Pat show this week, I think, Jacob, right? And it was why the history of LGBTQ plus, why it's important. And so as we go through our lives and we earn our rights, one of the things that people believe in, Mark, and this is really coming up now for people, they believe that if you make a promise to me, you're going to keep it. And trust is at the cornerstone of things. We made a promise to our audience and we said, yes, we're going to do a combination of live interviews and you're important to us. So we're also going to open up phone lines. We're going to communicate through text messages because we made a commitment and a promise to you. So today's show, Anatomy of a Promise, Anatomy of Trust, I should have called Anatomy of Promise. Anatomy of Trust is about what people do when they believe in themselves, when they trust their guidance, their angels, their guides. Mark, in your case, boom, what you do.
Yes.
And when they call into this show. And so as those people, you and I have an obligation, don't we?
We do. And I'm really glad that you brought that up because trust. And there's no other show like this one where people call in and they get a mediumship reading in tandem with world-class psychological, inspirational insights. And when, this is for the benefit of our audience, when Dr. Pat and I were discussing this, we said that we have to do a show that's going to make a difference. And that's why we mix it up. But our promise is that we'll do at least 2 call-in shows a month. And sometimes we do more than that.
Yeah.
But we also have to have interesting guests, and no topic is off the table.
Yep.
This isn't one of those, oh, we can't talk about that because that might offend somebody, or this would not be politically correct. Because, this is the very crux of freedom. Freedom is about
Yeah.
trust, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. That's where we are trusting the government not to cut off our rights. And
That's right.
that's it. And that's a real hot topic now.
It's a
And
hot one, and it is on the table, and we're watching it happen. And most people don't know what's happening. They don't know that little changes in states, like the voting right changes across the board, will affect the rights that people have. And people are fighting for their rights. Black and brown people fighting for their rights. LGBTQ, our trans sisters and brothers are just being brutally harmed. And this is Pride Month. But we've come a long way, baby.
we
We
have,
have
and Dr. Pat, you were there at the gay version of 4th of July. Well, you were. I was on tour of New York City, and I was in
Uh-huh.
Manhattan. And Rocky, she's one of the
Mhm.
producers on the show.
Mhm.
She's my manager, and we were in this one part of New York, and all of a sudden I saw this bar that said Stonewall, and I'm like, wait a second, Stonewall. And so Rocky and I walked in, and obviously it was a gay bar, and I was like, this is where it all started. And then I realized when I was guest appearing on the Dr. Pat show, I think in one episode you mentioned that you were at Stonewall. So wow. And for those of you who are not aware of this, Stonewall, up to that point, and actually past that,
Yeah.
police, not just in New York City, but all over the country, were raiding gay bars, rounding up gays and lesbians because being gay was illegal. And basically, they were discriminating and brutalizing people. And at Stonewall, a little bar in New York City, people fought back. And my illustrious co-host apparently was one of them who
Well,
fought
I mean,
back.
yeah, here's what I love about this. You can Google it, you can Wikipedia it, but there's a lot of things I talked about the other day on the show. And maybe, Jacob, you can put up the link for that show we did. But here's the thing that's happening, Mark, and this is why I decided to really talk about this more this month. We're forgetting our history. This came to light to me when I was working with a group of young women, and I work with young women, I work with women in recovery. People know that. But when I talked and asked a question, how do you how do you see your rights as a woman? Do you believe you have them? What I realized is women, and this was my aha moment, that really where I said I've got to do more about sharing what I know. We don't have equal rights in the United States. We don't have them at the federal level. And it is such a slippery slope when a country doesn't come out and protect all people, right? And when I speak to women about that, Mark, they're like, you're wrong. I'm going to Google it. You're like seriously wrong, Pat. And, I love that we're Googling it. And the reason I think it's so important, you and I did the show we did this morning, which is going to play next week, is this. Why are we talking about Stonewall? If you'd have asked me, this kid way back, frequented the village, Cafe Wa, Bob Dylan, the whole thing. If you'd have told me that little uprising was really pretty funny too. That little uprising, it's not funny when I think about it. So please don't email me. It was fun. It was funny. You had to be there to get the laugh out of it. But if you'd have told me that little uprising would be the basis a year later for the first gay pride march that took place in New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, I wouldn't have believed it because it wasn't about that. But here we are because bold actions protect bold rights, don't they, Mark?
They do. And an avalanche starts with the fall of the first pebble. You know, it does. In a sense, by analogy, I mean, we've all in history class had to learn about the Boston Tea Party. Okay. And, I remember reading it, and I'm a history buff. And okay, so a bunch of people got ticked off at England for, raising the tax on tea. So they broke on into a couple ships dressed up as Native Americans. Of course, they had to frame, the native population and throw tea in the water. And I'm like, okay, well, when I was in Boston, I was on a tour, and they started talking about that. In today's dollars, the amount of tea that was thrown into Boston Harbor would be $750 million. And it's like, oh, no wonder Great Britain responded the way it did, because a bunch of people went bankrupt. Now, while that may have seemed like a minor event, that started an avalanche. And Stonewall started an avalanche because for so long, gays and lesbians had been marginalized. They were considered mentally ill by the American Psychological
Oh,
Association. It
yeah.
was considered this
1950 something,
this
they did
yeah
that.
yeah. I mean, and it was really horrible. And it appears that gays and lesbians were just supposed to put up with being abused. And finally, it got to the point where no, we're not going to take this. Just like the colonists said, no, we're not going to be taxed without representation. I mean, and we could go throughout many examples in history. So Stonewall, and I don't know if it's even being taught in schools, but it should be. Just
Some
like,
schools,
well,
some schools. Yeah.
well, look at Tulsa. Okay, Tulsa. I never heard of Tulsa until about 2 years ago, and then I found out recently here in Florida there was today, I believe, was there was a similar massacre in Ocoee, Florida. Ocoee is a little town. It's not too far from Orlando, and there was a group of black people that wanted to vote, and 60 of them were murdered. Okay, so whoa, there. I mean,
Yeah.
and so people who have been on the fringe of society, marginalized, and what really bothers me as an attorney and someone who's fought for people's rights, in some circles, it appears that it's still okay to victimize the LGBT community. And we hear it under the guise of, oh, my religious liberty. But herein lies the distinction, is that in order for somebody to be legally considered a minority, the US Supreme Court has created a three-part test. One, that similarly situated people are treated dissimilarly. Okay, I think gays have that down. Okay, gay woman, straight woman who gets fired. Okay, and they're doing the same job. Two, there is a there's a history of discrimination. I think gays and lesbians have that one. But here's where the hang up is, that the protected class or the suspect class, okay, suspect in the legal sense, not as in, you're suspicious. It's an immutable characteristic, meaning it cannot be changed. And, doing research for all these shows, MIT came out with a recent genetic study. And although the report said there's no one gay gene, it appears to be several sequences and quite complicated. But I think every legitimate psychological organization in the world comes to the conclusion that someone being LGBT, it is not a choice. This is who you are. And for me as an attorney, the difference is that being a member of a religion is a choice. Okay, that is not an immutable characteristic. Being a bigot is a choice. Being LGBT is not. And I'm really perplexed at all the litigation. And I'm a
Mm-hmm.
member of the United States Supreme Court bar. And when I see the arguments, nobody's ever said that. Okay, they're going on about religious liberty, but they choose that religion. And guess what? There are Baptists and evangelicals who choose not to discriminate.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted to get that out there because once again, this is the psychic and the doc, but I'm also an attorney. I've been fighting for people's rights my whole lives, and I've seen how LGBT people have been absolutely brutalized in
Yeah.
this.
And, people have been asking me, Pat, what is it about this that has got up in your face? And I just gave Jacob an article and I want to reference it for a minute because this is deeply embedded in understanding trust. Especially if you've been part of a community where you believe that you have made progress in where you are. We have now seen this across the board in our Black and brown sisters and brothers. We have now seen that they believed in their lives decades ago. They trusted an infrastructure and a government when they were equal, when they marched down the road and somehow magically legislation was passed. They believed that the action to make that happen would follow. I sent an article just now to Jacob, and this was probably the article by John. And I'm going to tell everybody where it is because I got to give credit to this. This is there's a magazine called Advocate, advocate.com. And I'm looking at this commentary article and I'm looking at it. John Casey put it out the 27th. And it is a passionate plea for and against police set pride. And I'm reading this and I had to ask myself, what year are we in? And I'm going through the article and the bottom line to this article talks about the lack of understanding we have, and all of us have to have that. Emotions run very deep, very deep. But the relationship between New York City police and the LGBTQ community has a long history. But then a decision was made. And the decision was made, as John says, John said, I spoke candidly to Andre Thomas, a gay Black man who is co chair of Heritage of Pride, the organizers of New York City Pride events. And I reached out to Annabella Arboleda, a lesbian Latina and vice president of New York City Gay Office's Action League Goal, whose members were banned from Pride events through 2025. Police people, I had to read this. I had to go back and read what what John was saying. And I'm reading the article and I'm like, okay, 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 okay. And what? Banned from Pride events. Why? Why would police in the LGBTQ community be banned from Pride events? Now, we're talking about censorship and trust. And I can't say enough about how many guidelines I'm following as a network owner to make sure our hosts don't get kicked off networks. So that's why I'm referencing the article. But the question that John asked is why make this decision now, Mark? From a legal perspective, you have to be thinking in your mind, did they really do that? And so John goes on to say it's a conversation that's been happening for many years. See, this is where all of us that have been involved in our youth really have crawled under a rock, and something astrologically or alien takes over our body, and we come out from a rock, and we find out that what so the article says this goes way back to the reaction to the police in Stonewall 1969. So on one hand, there's a protective shell that says you can't do it because we're trying to protect. But see, these are the nuances that violate trust, that break promises, and they cause people to recognize that there's something at risk for themselves, their children, in the future. But what is it that we can trust in? And this show today isn't all about this. It's about, can we trust in ourselves? Can we get guidance, direction? When they call into the show for you, can we take that guidance, direction, trust it enough, trust ourselves, and do something great in the world? And that's why we have an open life show. Are we ready to go to the phones or do we want a quick break?
I'm ready. If you're good, I'm good.
Yeah, Mark, I thought you were going to say like I was born ready. Jacob, You want to start to tell us who we have coming on?
So unfortunately, the person that we did have on the line looks like they just disconnected a minute ago.
Sure.
So we need people to call in, it sounds like.
1-800-930-2819. I want to talk about trust a little bit. And so here's an interesting conversation. Um, I get asked by just about every publicist or book agent, we don't, why can't you sit down and write a book, Pat? Why don't you write a book? And I keep asking myself, like, okay, when I get a minute, I'll sit down and write a book, but what am I going to write about? Right. So they get a hold of my research. It's published. You can Google it. It'll show up my name. And they said, you, you did award-winning research on broken promises. I said, yes, I studied broken promises and their consequences from 10 years. And they said, why aren't you writing about that? Given where we are as a society, given what's at risk, given what people, I said, yes, I studied it for 10 years and I was depressed for 2 after. I said, you can't study broken promises. You can't interview hundreds of people, get their quotes, start and cry with them and understand. And I think that, when we do a show like The Psychic and the Doc, we are so connected to
Yeah.
each person's vulnerability, Mark.
It,
I
it,
want
it,
I want to
it,
talk to you about this in your upcoming book
yes.
because there's a frequency to this and you have to trust the frequency, don't you?
Yes, and that's one of the key concepts in my new book, which encompasses trust, because people call in here, they're trusting us, they're trusting in my abilities, in your abilities, but what we do is we present information, but people have to trust their own inner self, their own inner voice to make the right decision. The problem is that I saw Jim Carrey say it the best, because I know that he's converted to Buddhism, and people think of him as all these zany characters that he has portrayed, um, but there's an incredible depth to the man as well. And he was talking about how the ego constantly undermines our confidence. The ego's always telling you you're not good enough, smart enough, pretty enough, insightful enough. And then the ego, he said, always tempts you with the promise of something that you already possess. And so when that starts to happen, that's when you have to
Mm-hmm.
trust in
Mm-hmm.
yourself.
Yeah, I want to take this one step further. I think Jacob is trying to pick up people that are calling in. If we don't keep talking about it, if we don't, keep our word, Mark, your word, my word, the network's word, everybody's here. It's really important. I had an interesting challenge this week, and I think this is what's happening. There's a series of things, right? And we talked about it with Herb this morning, but it's a series of things as we continue to get flagged by social media channels because 3 years ago we did a show or somebody on the network did a show 3 years ago, 5 years ago about something that was quite controversial. And now their guidelines say you can't have an opinion. If you're not a doctor, you can't have an opinion about medical stuff, right? If you're not at this, you can't have an opinion. And by the way, if you come on and say some stuff about that, we are going to take you down. What? What did you say?
I
And
see.
it's crazy. And there are some things I totally agree with. I
Well,
just want to know how much time the YouTube people have on their hands that they can go back in archives 3, 5 years older than that and somehow use an algorithm to tell us we don't have the freedom to talk about a topic.
yeah, I find that very interesting. But you see, YouTube is, see, people say, well, I have a freedom of speech. but not on YouTube because it's not a government entity. Freedom of
Private.
speech, right, right. Well, you understand that, but a lot of people don't. Like, somebody was picking at me on social media, so I deleted their comment. They said, "You're infringing on my right of freedom of speech, and as an attorney, you know that." It's like, yeah, I'm an attorney, and I know that I'm not. So get off my page, because look, I'm a nice guy, but if you're going to sit there and call me names and things like that, I have a right to block you. Okay. And I trust in that.
And Mark, I think that you and I opened up the forum to do a show like this for a lot of reasons. We knew the pain people were
Yeah.
feeling, and we connected to make sure that, while we're hearing what people are saying and they are asking questions of us, that we are compassionate and within integrity.
Yes.
And, I want to talk about integrity. Integrity was part of my research. And here's what I found nobody studied it. Nobody can define it. Even today, it is not defined. And I love when somebody says it's not. When I did this research, there was only one book out on integrity that could be used as a reference. And I sat down and my committee chair, I love her, but she was tough, said, "You're going to have to define it." And I'm like, "I don't, why?" She says it's directly related to trust and promises. And I went on this journey and I did this research. And at the end of it, I absolutely got a definition of it. And and when you get empirical research to define something, you can put it in a paper. And so YouTube, I'm just giving you a clue. This is my research, so what I'm about to say is the truth. And integrity in my studies was defined as a majority of, and this is a majority of the people. Wait to hear these numbers, Mark. That there are four basic components to integrity. And let's see how well we do with them. You ready? Number
Ready.
one, be accountable for doing what one says you will do. 88% across the board said, boom, that's
Yep.
one. Two, be trustworthy. 80%, and I define what that is later. Three, be fair and just with dealing with others. 72% that. And the kicker in this research, which subsequent cosmopolitan people published in an article, is this. Four, went through the charts, show respect and honor the dignity of others. 96% of everybody I interviewed, I interviewed corporations. I interviewed a big airline corporation down the road. I'm going to read a quote and then we'll go to break. So I got to speak with a woman whose company was, what do they call that? Chapter 13? What is it when they
The
go bankruptcy?
bankruptcy.
What is that
Yeah.
thing called? Chapter
Yeah, I think
11?
Chapter 11. Yeah, when they
Yeah.
go bankrupt.
Yeah.
Yeah, or restructuring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She agreed to an interview. And I sat down. And by the way, these interviews were supposed to be 20 minutes. I was on for 2 hours with people. I have 1,200 pages of interview notes. That's why these folks want me to publish a book. But I got to tell you, this is it was heart wrenching after I was done. I had to do postdoctorate work on it. And then I was like, give me my Harley Davidson, leave me alone. Here's what she said. When I asked her about, can you define integrity? And she talked about this. We don't cut corners. We don't sell seconds. We don't advertise fraudulently. We are going to do everything above board in compliance with the rules and regulations. We will treat each other with respect and high regard, and every interaction should be of that nature. Everything and everyone will be treated in the same way. We'll address issues immediately, truthfully, and honestly, and we will make sure everything is clearly communicated and clearly demonstrated.
Beautiful. I love it.
Let's take a short break. When we come back, we're right on the phones. Why? Because we promised that we would, and we will. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Psychic and the Doc. I'm Dr. Pat. You can find out about me on the Dr. Pat Show, and pretty soon you'll find me about a lot about me on my website and some of the things that we're doing to support all of you. Please stay tuned because within a relatively short period of time, you'll see major changes in our network. You'll see new channels added. And by the way, one of the channels will be a channel dedicated to LGBTQ conversations and truth. Mark, how do people find out about you? And more importantly, I don't know, can you share anything about the book? Like, when is it coming out? What's the deal?
Yeah, well, my website is afterlifefrequency.com. The title of my new book is The Afterlife Frequency. So my website, afterlifefrequency.com, is the same as the website. And my book's coming out in October, but there's been a lot of, I understand people are already pre-ordering it through Amazon. There's already a lot of interest, and I've been booked not just, I mean, obviously on the Psychic and the Doc, but on several other shows. They want to start interviewing me about this because this book is very groundbreaking. It's the scientific proof for spirit contact and how that awareness will change your life. And so we'll be talking more about it as we get closer to the launch of the book. But please visit my website, afterlifefrequency.com. And I invite everyone to sign up for my newsletter, subscribe to my newsletter on my, which is on my website, because I also post what we have coming up on the Psychic and the Doc. And Dr. Pat, what you were saying about the 4 elements of integrity.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that should be taught from kindergarten. Well, people need to know. Part of my family and your family too is Italian, and the concept of honor means a lot. But does honor really mean anything now, January 6th? Apparently not. How can people that say they honor and respect law enforcement turn around and beat police officers with a staff that has the American flag on it? There's no honor there. There's no integrity there. There's nothing patriotic there. That wasn't a revolution. Okay. Because when we were talking about Boston Tea Party and Stonewall, these are people who are being oppressed, not a mob who just didn't get its way. And there is a difference.
Yeah. Look, I love the article John put out. I'm not so sure I love the conclusion he comes to. And I love Arbadella, and I love the way she talked about this, and she takes us on this journey. And I think the thing for me, and probably you as a lawyer, we're probably closer to these issues than most.
Yes.
And I think when you marginalize a group of people because of their profession, see, that's the difference here.
Yeah.
It's a profession. Then how do you not let the marginalization have for other professions? Let's go to the phones.
Righty, first up, we've got Yaja from Hawaii.
Hi, welcome to the show. How can we help you today? I'm sure you want to chat with Mark.
Yes. Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Aloha.
Aloha.
Hello. Aloha. Yes, Mark. I think once upon a time, and it was probably just about 3 years ago, I saw you in Virginia Beach, and we talked about, hopefully maybe one of these days you could come out to Hawaii. We desperately need someone to talk about the subjects you talk about.
I'm sorry, I cannot understand a thing that's coming through.
Well, I can hear her, and so we're gonna let Mark turn up his speakers on his headset.
I'm up all the way. Do you have speakers on your radio or computer? This is like the
fifth person that has said.
Maybe because there's a computer on. Let me make sure the computer is off. Is that any better?
Are you on a cell phone or a headset? Cell phone?
On a cell phone.
Just talk directly in the cell phone. Get off the speaker.
Yeah. Take off the speaker.
So, Mark, basically what she's saying, as like so many people, when is Mark going to go to Hawaii?
Oh, let me tell you that twist my arm. Well, I love Hawaii. I've been there a number of times, and I've been there to study the ancient Hawaiian religion. And boy, we could talk all night about that. There is a spirituality, a beauty, and I just absolutely love hanging out with the Hawaiians. I just love it. So how can I help you?
It is amazing. for me, especially, I mean, I'm Polish, 100% Polish. And living here on the other side of the world from Poland, I find there's so much similarity between, again, the spirituality and the thoughts and the religion and everything. So it's kind of exciting. I met you once in Virginia Beach, and we started talking about that. But your subject today, you were talking about integrity and freedom of speech.
Right.
Even in my culture, integrity is very much closely related to honor.
Yes, it is.
You're honored.
Yes.
You're an honorable person.
Yeah.
You do the right thing at the right time, and that covers all subjects.
Yep, that's
So
correct.
if you have integrity, you have honor, you're a good person. And my family, well, you know, World War II, were deported to Siberia by the Russians.
Right.
So they lost their freedom. One day, they have their own home. Next, they're on a cattle train, you know, Polish Catholics, and they're off to Siberia.
Wow.
Now, you talk about loss of freedom of speech. That's when you appreciate freedom of
Yes.
speech, because you don't even get a chance to make your speech when your freedom is taken away. And that's when the people really appreciate it. Yeah, but you're now in the United States, everyone is talking about, oh, you're a communist, you're a fascist, you're a Nazi. They don't even know what the terminology is. They have no concept of what sort of freedoms are being taken away. All of those things is nothing what we have in the United States. Nothing. We have the most freedom in the world, and yet they disrespect it. They run around, like you said, like January 6th, what did they show? They showed such disrespect to this country. And I think it takes someone like myself who's been born here to really understand the ridiculousness of it all.
You know, I'm really glad that you brought that up because when I was a student, that was before the Iron Curtain came down. I was in Poland.
Yes.
I was in the
Oh,
Soviet.
yeah.
I was in the what's now the Czech Republic, but Czechoslovakia then, and I was in East Germany. And let me tell you something. When I got back, I was true blue all-American boy. Okay, you know, because we hear people, oh, America, you know, they start putting us down, all that. Yeah, we're perfect. We've got our warts, we got our scars, we got our bad history. But I'll put up with my own bad government before I would want to be under the benevolent dictatorship of something. Something like
You
that. You know, and it's really sad
Get off
because,
that airplane, you kiss the ground, you know?
well, it's really sad when you
You know.
see an amazing country like Russia with a rich and deep culture in the clutches of somebody like Putin. But I truly believe in the resilience of the human spirit. And there's something that Gandhi, I like to quote Gandhi because he was just amazing on many different levels. And admittedly, he had his flaws. He was a human being. But he said that there have always been tyrants and murderers, but in the end, they always fall. And the way of truth and love prevails. And he said, always think of that. So I'm really I'm so happy that you called in to share this because you know firsthand, having lived under the heel of a totalitarian dictatorship, how precious, like Dr. Pat. Okay, so you were part of Stonewall, all right? Yeah, and the police were brutal, but let's say that had occurred in East Germany at the time. They may have just opened fire.
No,
Okay,
there's a
which is
fundamental
what
difference.
happened in Tulsa.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, I'm not saying that America is perfect, because I remember getting into a discussion with a gentleman from East Germany about, oh, look what Germany did. He goes, really? And exactly what has your country done to the black people and the Native Americans? I'm like,
Exactly.
oops.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, you gotta, I've done conversations and talked about Stonewall from a almost comedic point of view. You have to ask yourself the question, what police organization in their right mind decides to raid any bar at 3 a.m. and not expect a problem? Just saying. What do you think people are doing there? They're drinking. Thank you for calling in. Anything else we could do to help you?
My phone is garbling a little bit. What was the last question?
Anything we can do to help you?
Yes, maybe a little bit off subject, but like many people in my family have died. Like even my parents, my mother lost 3 sons, and then so when he came to America and everything, it was like a family was the most important thing. Nothing, money is not important. Everything else, education, but especially family.
Yeah.
And I lost my son 5 years ago in a really. It was to me. It was sort of like an Edgar Allan Poe thing. There's something unexpected, and I just would love to hear. If you can feel anything or hear anything, I would love to have a message because I feel I communicate with him.
Yeah.
My mother was psychic, by the way, but after she died, we lost contact.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, so sorry for your loss. I'm sorry for your loss of your son 5 years ago. And, sometimes Mark knows when people come through or who they are. But honestly, what I'm learning from Mark is we don't know what we don't know about the moment that anybody comes through. So if you could check in, Mark, and just see, is there any message? Is there anybody there?
Yeah. With your son's passing, what I'm getting is a male energy associated with you, and this may not be your son. This could be another male, but I almost feel like I'm drowning. Now, drowning doesn't always mean like going underwater, literally drowning. This could mean fluid buildup in the chest. I feel the sense of asphyxiation, unable to breathe. My throat feels closed in, and I feel this. I don't want to call it inflammation, but a swelling. I know maybe, but I'm feeling this swelling throughout my body and almost as if my lungs are going into a state of paralysis. Does that make any sense to you?
That would be kind of a difficult thing, only because my son's heart was punctured by his ribs. He had
Can you say that again?
Yeah, because we can barely hear you.
Yeah. I think it's your cell phone. Can you say it again, please?
Yeah, that doesn't sound too much of what it could be. The only person I would think of would be my father, but he died because his heart was failing. But I think my son. It couldn't be my son. He was my father would be an older gentleman. My son was 32, 34. Excuse me.
Okay.
His heart was punctured by his sternum.
Oh, there you go.
There it is.
So that if his lungs were punctured by his sternum, that would cause blood, which would fill up in the lungs, and then that would also be like an atrophy shutting down of the lungs. So we got him. Okay.
It could be. It could be. Yeah, it could be like a one.
Hold on. It keeps giving you. Just for your benefit and for all the callers. When I'm communicating with the spirit, please do not talk over me or interrupt me. Wait till I say, does that make sense or do you understand that? Okay. He keeps giving you a variety of flowers, but mostly tulips. And they are red, yellow, and blue. Red, yellow, blue. Red, yellow, blue. So those 3 colors, red, yellow, and blue, are of an emotional significance to you, but there's also got to be something, and he's specifically giving you tulips. Is there anything with the colors red, yellow, and blue or tulips which resonate with you? Now you can respond.
Not especially, but it would be probably something my father loved flowers. He used to graft roses and do all sorts of stuff with everything, every kind of flower.
Oh, there you go.
It could be my father. Mm-hmm. I don't have a large family. We don't have a lot of relatives. There was only the 5 of us when we came to the
I'm going to suggest.
Yes, let's do this.
Yeah, if you could call in maybe next week or the week after on a landline or on a clear phone, because what's happening is to get a proper connection. I'm picking up on your spirits, but the resonance of your voice is key to a proper connection with the other side. So rather than us struggle, call back when you have a clear connection. Yeah,
the other thing is, this is what I tell callers. If you're on a cell phone, we tend to take our cell phones and muffle them up against our face. And honestly, the speaker is here. So you want to just move it away and speak into the speaker. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm actually doing this am I showing this on air?
Yeah.
It's a giant phone. But, the bottom line is your speaker's here. And if you put this up against your face, can't understand me either. Thank you for calling in. We're going to keep going on the phones. Who do we have next?
Yep. Next
Jacob.
up, we're headed to Connecticut, and we've got SB from Connecticut on the line.
All right, good. Let's bring Esty on. Welcome to the show. You're live.
Hi, thank you so much.
Hi,
Hi, Mark.
Espy.
I have a question for you. Hi,
Hi,
Dr.
SB.
Pat.
Now there's a phone connection. Woohoo! Hi, SB.
So you can hear me just fine, I'm assuming,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
You
Yep.
sound great.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, perfect. Mark, you mentioned trust as a focus in your new book.
Yes.
Now that we're moving closer to normalcy, the vibrations of our planet have shifted dramatically, as you know. How does
Yes.
trust fit into our time today and moving forward?
Wow. Oh, I know Dr. Pat's chomping at the bit.
You
Dr.
go
Pat,
first, Mark.
Oh, okay. All right. Um, the world's not going to be the same. Everyone says we got to get back to normal. Guess what? We can't go back in time. People say, oh, I wish we could go back to the good old days of the 1950s. No, never going to happen. The world's very different now. Trust has been broken on many levels. We found out that we cannot trust our politicians. People don't trust their healthcare providers. They don't trust. Trust has been broken, but I do see trust being reformed, and it's going to take time. There's been enough silliness, enough flip-flopping, and even now, it seems like the CDC is in a sense violating our trust because every week they come out with a different policy. Oh, don't wear your mask. Oh, wear your mask. Oh, social distance. Don't social distance. Do this, do that. It's like because there's so much political and social pressure to get us back to normal, get us back to normal. We will come to a new normal, but we must trust the scientists and not the organizations that flip-flop. So trust is going to be very important. Also, we've learned a lot about trusting our fellow person. And so I think what Dr. Pat has said about the four components of integrity ring true now more than ever. Dr. Pat?
I love your question. First, let me tell you how much I love your question. So thank you for it.
Thank you.
10 years of research on promises. And let me just share this quickly with you. I know we don't have a lot of time. When you look at and study something like promises, there are two things that are involved. One, I'm explicitly going to promise you that if you call into the show, our phone lines are going to be open. And unless the line drops, you're going to get to talk to us. But not so explicit is the banner we have up that says, yeah, call into the show. And it's implied, right? And here's what's happening. You know, when people feel like there is something that someone somewhere made a statement to obligate them, then when that doesn't happen, there is a series of consequences. Trust is just one of them. And I just want to say that to you. Trust happens to be one. But I will tell you, really, when you look at, and I'm just talking from my research and then the people that took my research and looked at it. When you look at this, here's the effect. Are you ready?
Yes.
10 areas were negatively affected to violation of psychological contracts. That's what a promise is. If I'm on here with you and I say, you know what, let me call you later. Give Jacob your phone number and I don't call you, that's a broken promise. But here's the depth of what your question means, and it'll take years to come. It has an effect on your health, on how you're satisfied you are, how much trust you have in others, and how much trust you have in yourself. It has an effect on your commitment to showing up and your view of integrity. It has a devastating effect on what we believe is fair and equitable. I don't know if you heard us talk about the whole police thing in New York. It has an effect on whether or not you're going to stay engaged or you're going to flee. And these things that I'm talking about affect how we perform and act in the world. So your question leads me to only one answer, and I got to go back to it. There is a trust that you can't show in empirical research. You have to trust in yourself. And a lot of this has to do with trust in your level of spirit and guidance. And I think for me, after 10 years studying and postdoctoral research and winning awards on this, I was depressed. But when I studied and heard people say, this is their response, and aren't we seeing this now? I'm going to make a statement that is political, but not. There are always two sides to the coin. That's what Mama Doris would say. She'd say, there are two sides to the coin. I don't have a coin you're going to throw up the air and flip, and you think you're going to get tails because I got two tails. No, they're two. They're heads and tails. And she would say this. And she'd say, can you get to the place where you understand the other side? So we have seen the effects of broken promises. Here they are: anger, fear, hurt, betrayal, cynicism, stress, anxiety, depression. And I'm going to leave you with this. The way this is going to play out for the American people, yes, it's going to play out in your relationships, but watch what's going to happen in the workplace. That's what I'm keeping an eye on. People
Well,
are
thank you.
returning from FMLA leaves. They're going back to work. They're being told they can't have the salary they have, and they don't even know they have a legal right. So I think it's for us to talk about it. And then if you're somebody like me, you have to think about what you're going to do about it. I don't know. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you for calling in. Wow.
Yeah, SP, look forward to calling in again.
Thank you. I bet you haven't been to Connecticut either. You're going to have to get to Connecticut.
I have been to Connecticut,
Have you?
and I loved. Let me tell you, there's no place finer than New England in the summer and the early fall. Oh, it's
Yeah.
so
We have 5
beautiful.
minutes. Do we have time to take? Let's do it. Jacob.
All righty. Let's bring on Chidaria from Texas.
Hi, Chidaria. Hello.
Oh, hello.
Hey there. You're live.
I'm live?
Yeah. Yes. You're not just live, but you're live and alive. And you're live on air right now with us. That's okay. Welcome to the show.
Yeah. This is my first time. I'm nervous. And I have a question for Dr. Anthony, Mr. Anthony.
She's the doctor. I'm the lawyer. But
Yeah.
but thank you for throwing me an extra degree.
I love that.
I've always wanted to be a doctor. You may call me Professor
How
Anthony.
could the
How can we help you?
yeah, I love Mr. Anthony. I love that. Let's go. How can he help you?
I have a question. So, I've been reading your novel, your book, Never Letting Go.
Yes.
And I've been on it for months because I haven't been able to finish it because of school. And my mom got it for me. She got it for me around August last year because I just don't really like talking about it. But, well, I'm just going to say the word transitioned. My dad transitioned from, the virus. And a lot, I don't like words like, like loss and,
Well,
death and
absolutely.
things like that. Those are trigger words for me.
Sure they are. And I completely agree with you. They're difficult. I mean, it is very, very hard to accept the enormity of the pain of the loss. And words have so much power, because you say lost. To say the word died really, really hurts.
Yeah.
Transitioned. One of the reasons that I like to use the word transitioned is because who and what we are never ceases to exist. We are pure energy, and we transfer from this world to the afterlife frequency. And it's all about an energy transfer. Now, that being said, that doesn't make it emotionally easier, but the crux of my work is for people to accept the reality of the passing, and through that acceptance, begin to find inner peace with it, in the knowledge that when you die, you take you with you, that nobody ceases to exist. So anyway, I didn't mean to interject, but I know we've only got like a minute or two. What can I help you with? What is your question?
Well, just a few minutes ago with another caller, I noticed you had like your spiritual pickup reading, like with the feelings that you were
Right, the
getting.
physical sensations of how
Yeah.
they died. Let me explain really quickly. We don't have enough time for this, but oftentimes when I connect with one person, spirits come in groups. It's what I call the collective consciousness. So spirits that have a commonality either with the people that I'm communicating with or with them in the manner on how they died. And if your father passed from COVID, certainly he had the filling of the lung sensation, the atrophy, the difficulty breathing. So he would be one of those spirits as well. And he says that you are not eating enough fresh fruit, young lady. And I am actually tasting a fresh pear. I feel like I just bit into the most delicious, juicy pear. What is with your dad or you or someone close to you with fresh fruit, particularly pears?
Yeah, answer that one.
I don't know about the pears, but I don't like fruit. I do
There
not
you
like
go.
I think we have a bullseye.
I
Oh.
think we go.
In spirit communication, dislikes are just as important as likes. Now, it's not my point because YouTube might get on our case to tell you what or what not to eat, but you may wish to consult with a nutritionist about whether or not you should start incorporating fresh fruit into your diet. Because just because your father is on the other side doesn't mean
Yeah.
he's going to stop telling you what to do or stop looking out for his baby girl.
Awesome.
Wow. Wow. I'm actually glad
All
I
right.
got that.
Yeah. And so make sure you call in again so we can follow up on this, okay? And see, pick out a fruit you like. You got it?
I'll try on that one.
Oh, you'll find one. There's one out there.
I know
There's a
there
good
is.
fruit. There's something
I
out
know
there.
there is.
All right, so we
Thank
look forward
you.
to you calling back in. Many blessings.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
God bless you.
What a great show. I want to thank all of you for tuning us in and turning us on. Mark, what's your personal message? What would you like to leave everybody with today?
Have faith and trust in yourself first, because when you do, then you'll be able to start trusting others.
I want to thank Jacob for doing what he does, Linda, Jessica, picking up all the phones, and most importantly, for all of you out there, you're feeling like you're down a court. That's why we're doing the show. We hope that we can help fill you up as you fill yourselves up. We'll see you next week. Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning into The Psychic and the Doc with Mark Anthony and me, Dr. Pat Baccili, right here on TransformationTalkRadio.com. Hey, look, come back next week so we can explore with you more of life's many challenges and learn from fascinating guests. And you know what? Even Mark and me. We'll connect you and discover insights from people in this life and from the afterlife. Extraordinary problems? Yeah, they do. They require extraordinary solutions. But step into the world of possibilities with us on The Psychic and the Doc. That's every Thursday, 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on TransformationTalkRadio.com. That's TransformationTalkRadio.com. And don't forget, we're also live face-to-face on Facebook.com, Transformation Talk Radio.